It's the amazing Rico Brogna podcast with your host, Evan Roberts.
Jeez. Well, that absolutely sucked, ladies and gentlemen. The New York Mets lose 2 out of 3 to the Oakland Athletics. I'm a mess. I wasn't on the air today because I'm a little sick, but I tried to rest up throughout the day, make sure I was ready for the big Fanatics Fest, which will be live out on Friday, and also to give you a Rico Brogna reaction to what I was hoping was going to be the Mets proving again that they respond to adversity. Because getting swept by the Seattle Mariners and getting embarrassed and getting their face stuffed into a locker was adversity. Coming back, playing the Oakland A's, a team that has played well over the last month and a half, and getting absolutely pummeled in game 1 with Paul Blackburn giving us his worst start as a Met, 3 starts in, that's adversity. Austin Adams dancing on their grave, OMGing, cursing everybody out, that's adversity. And so I had hoped that the Mets would again, which they've done all year long, respond and show us that they have stones and show us that maybe this team is different than the one that scares us from 2 years ago or last year. And in game 2 of this series, to their credit, behind some really good pitching from David Peterson and some breakout offense late in the game, the Mets responded. And they go into this finale, this game 3 of a 3-game series against the Oakland A's, feeling, at least I'm feeling, win this freaking game and all is right with the world. They will settle maybe some of the concerns we had coming out of the Seattle series. And to jump out to an early lead, to have Jose Quintana, I think, do a really good job in the first 3 innings of finding his way out of trouble. Now, he's given a break. The Mets are giving a break because the A's best hitter, Rooker, isn't even there the last 2 days. Congratulations to him and his wife having a kid. But Quintana is dancing through the bullets early in this game. Bases loaded, 2 out, huge strikeout to end the first inning. Puts himself in a big 2-out trouble in the 3rd inning, gets Zach Geloff to fly out. And all the while, the Mets are hitting. The Mets are beating the crap out of Mitch Spence. They're drawing walks. Jeff McNeil has that just classic 11-pitch at-bat. Mark Vientos hits the home run in the 3rd inning. Luis Torrens, who deserves a lot of credit, greeted the reliever Michael Otans with a 2-run hit. They get in clutch hitting, and the Mets are responding. And with a 5-0 lead going into the 4th inning, the idiot that I am, and maybe it's because I'm sick and I was drugged up on, God knows what I was taking. It was pretty much just Tylenol. But you know what? You take a lot of Tylenol, you drink a lot of water, you pee in every 30 seconds. It doesn't feel good. It was just a horrible experience. Like, a part of me was, oh, I'm sick. I get to watch the Met game. That's like an added bonus as opposed to being on the air where I can barely watch it. But the truth is, when you watch a Met game that takes 8.5 hours and you watch a Met game and you're sick and your head hurts and you're just gassed up on medicine and you got to pee every 30 seconds, it's not a great experience. I did watch the game with my youngest son, Spence, who spent the first 20 minutes of the game saying, Dad, why they talk about me? Why they talk about me? And I'm sure many of you are saying, what the hell are you talking about? The starting pitcher for the Oakland A's, his name was Mitch Spence. So every time Spence threw ball 1 or strike 1, my 3-year-old thought they were talking about him. But either way, it ain't about me. I was on my sickbed watching this stupid game, but up 5-0, I felt good. Up 5-0, I felt like, all right, here we go. This is another example of the Mets responding, of the Mets looking adversity straight in the eye, looking at a part of the season that could have had things go haywire, and responding. And their offense was really the catalyst. I mean, here's Mark Vientos batting second, which I love. It's actually something I suggested, not here on the Rico, but on WFAN about 2 days ago when I was whining about Brandon Nimmo remaining as the second place hitter. Tiki said, okay, great. Who should bat second? I said Mark Vientos. And Mark Vientos had a wonderful performance showing that Piazza-esque power to right field. But you have a 5-0 lead. Let's keep this in mind. You have a 5-0 lead, and you've got, for all intents and purposes, based on their resume, based on what they've accomplished in this sport, you have at least your ace on the mound. And Jose Quintana, and I want to start with him before we bitch about 800 other things. And I apologize. If you're looking for optimism, you ain't getting it from me today. I'm in a pissy poor mood because everything about this game and everything about this series, and maybe a little selfishly because I feel like crap, it is not an easy day to find positivity. But I'll start with Quintana. You've just been handed a 5-0 lead. 5-0 lead. He gets himself into like minor trouble in the fourth inning, gives up a leadoff hit to a guy no one's ever heard of in Armando Alvarez, and then he gets 2 outs in a row against the 8-9 hitter. So think about this. It's 5-0. There are 2 outs. There's a runner on first base, and the light hitting top of the order is coming up. Look, if Daz Cameron and Miguel Andujar roped doubles against Quintana, I'd still be pissed off, but I'd say, you know what? It happens. It's baseball. A couple of hitters came up and they smoked you. That's not what happened. What happened was Jose Quintana walked Daz Cameron. He ain't Mike. Daz Cameron on 5 pitches. And that's with a 5-0 lead. You don't need to nibble when you're facing Daz Cameron with a 5-run lead. You go after him. And look, like I said, if Daz Cameron rips a double up the alley, you could even tip your hat. And Jose Quintana, a major league pitcher, a guy who is supposed to be the supposed ace of this team with Kodai Senga out, walks Daz Cameron on 5 pitches. But if that's not bad enough, and I don't want to hear what Miguel Andujar does against left-handed pitching, you walk Miguel Andujar on 4 pitches? So let me get this straight. Jose Quintana with a 5-0 lead. This is where, I don't want to say they lost the game, but this is where a game that could have been easy, could have been nice and organized, could have been a nice little, all right, got a 5-0 lead, spit on it. It's an easy victory. This is where you turn it into a baseball game because Jose Quintana couldn't throw an effing strike in the 4th inning. So he walks Daz Cameron on 5 pitches. He walks Miguel Andujar on 4 pitches. And here comes this J.J. Bleday. And when J.J. Bleday hit the line drive to right field, and by the way, at this point in this game, I am now lying upside down in my bed while I'm like half scoring the game. This is how crappy I felt earlier in the day. I feel better physically now, even though I'm just pissed off about this team. But basically, this is how crappy I felt. I'm laying upside down in my bed. I'm watching the game. And I would only score the at-bat once the at-bat was over. So 3-1 walk. Okay, now I'll write 3-1 BB. So I'm laying upside down as I watch J.J. Bleday rope a line drive right into the Chase Utley corner. I still call it that because he made it famous hitting balls right down the right field line over the fence for a grand slam home run. And I swear to God, man, no one's with me. No one's sitting next to me at this point. I felt like we were screwed. I really did. One of these days, and Hoff and I were talking about this. Hoff, by the way, thank you to Mrs. Hoffman, and thank you to Pete Hoffman. Pete Hoffman pressed record today from Disney World. All right, so he took a break from Disney World with his entire family to put the YouTube link up and to press record. So sort of thank you to Pete, but really thank you to his wife. That's the one thing I've learned. Like anyone who's happy I did Rico's on vacation, don't thank me. Thank my wife, all right? Because she allowed it to happen. So thank you to Mrs. Hoffman for allowing this podcast to even happen right now. But Hoff and I were talking that we will eventually do some Ricos during games. I don't know legally how we could pull that off. Clearly, we don't have the playoffs to worry about. So maybe we could beta test this in late September when they're buried. But if we were doing a live in-game Rico when J.J. Bleday hit that grand slam home run, what I would have said to you is I would have looked into the camera and I would have said, we're fucked. That's what I would have said. And that's how it felt. And it felt that way for a myriad of reasons. Number one, I didn't trust this bullpen to go out and find 15 outs because you knew Quintana was done. And quite frankly, think about how lucky Quintana was to even get out of that inning. He hit Shea Langeliers, who basically just destroyed us all week long. And then he gives up a double to Tyler Nevin. And by the grace of God, Langeliers is thrown out trying to score on the double where he missed home plate. Remember that play? He misses home plate. The tag is missed. And then a really good heads-up play by Luis Torrens for tagging him anyway, even though the home plate umpire, Scott Barry, signaled safe. I thought that was it gets lost in losses like this. That's a smart play by Luis Torrens. And I think that's what you have to do now in this new world of replay. You got to play through it. So you're not sure if he's safe or not, whatever. Just tag him. And Torrens did. And luckily, that turned out to be the third out. That should have tied the game. Quintana should have literally given up all 5 runs back with 2 outs and a runner on first base. And then you've got this bullpen. And it's not just the bullpen that blew this game. We'll get to the other aspects, but let's start with this bullpen. And let's start with the fact that something Mendy did on Tuesday screwed them today. And that's the handling of Jose Butto. You have got to be careful when you use your best reliever. And let's be very, very clear about this. Jose Butto right now, outside of Diaz, who's your closer, is the Mets' best reliever. And it ain't particularly close. It's not Reed Garrett. It's not Ryan Stanek. It's not Phil Maton. It's certainly not Adam Ottavino. It's Jose Butto. So this goes all the way back to Tuesday. And I think Mendy had a very tough 3-game series. Very tough series. Why are you using Jose Butto in a long relief role in a game in which, yeah, sure, you could come back. We'll talk a little bit about game 1 coming up in a little bit. Sure, you can come back in the game, but this is your best reliever. I don't think you should think about it as, hey, he's our best long reliever. Maybe he can keep us in a game in which we're down 7-1. No. I would have the attitude of, this is my best reliever. Do I want to use my best reliever in a situation like that? And by the way, to be specific, yes, they were down 7-1 when Jose Butto came into this game. And granted, they came back and they made it relatively close. And then Butto struggled. That's besides the point. But that's a mistake. And the reason that's a mistake is because if you are more careful with how you use Jose Butto is available in this game. And if Jose Butto is available in this game, and let's say in the 5th inning, when the Mets gave themselves the extra run on the Vientos home run, so all of a sudden 5-4 becomes 6-4. So now you're asking your bullpen to get 15 outs, but at least it's a 2-run lead instead of a 1-run lead. You're going to Jose Butto. You're not going to Huascar Brazoban, who, it's crazy. Brazoban got an out and got a double play on like a handful of pitches a day earlier. And Brazoban hasn't been bad as a Met. He had that one implosion, but outside of that has been relatively good. But we can't trust Huascar Brazoban, especially when think about what the first thing he does when he comes in. What does he do? He does the thing the Mets have copyrighted. He walks a guy because that's all Met pitching does. To a T. Every last one of them. BB, BB, BB. I am so sick and tired of writing BBs in my scorecard constantly. But think about it. Huascar Brazoban comes into a game, immediately puts himself into a trouble, throws a wild pitch. Now all of a sudden that 2-run lead is a 1-run lead. Doesn't completely implode, gets Miguel Andujar to get out of the inning. But, it's a 2-run game. Now it's a 1-run game. And then you got Reed Garrett. Boy, has the bloom come off the rose of Reed Garrett. Back-to-back hits. They play the infield back with a 1-run lead, which I'm not even against because you can't allow it to become a big inning. But they get 2 runs in, including Seth Brown getting the RBI single. And again, Reed Garrett gets out of it, but he gives up the 2 runs that turned out to be the difference in the game. So the Met bullpen immediately, they need 15 outs. Before they got 6 outs, they give it right back. But this is where you get to the offense. And I know that it's easy to say, well, they scored 6 runs. How can you rip the offense? Here's how I can rip the offense. Here's how anyone who watched this game can rip the offense. They scored 6 runs in the first 4 innings of the game. Mark Vientos supplied half of them with a couple of opposite field home runs. You are now facing, before you get to Mason Miller, who they would eventually get to, you're facing the underbelly of the A's bullpen, a part of the bullpen that's not that good. You're allowed to score runs after Mark Vientos goes opposite field in the 4th inning. You're allowed to. And the Met offense did absolutely nothing. And they had a handful of opportunities. You go back to the sixth inning. Francisco Lindor draws a walk. Lindor continues to be a guy who's not a problem. He's one guy you can't fully rip. But after he draws a walk, he does a great job of initiating a balk against Scott Alexander. Does a great job of distracting him enough to get a balk against him. It was actually against Tyler Ferguson, if you're keeping track at home. You got a runner on second with one out. That's the tying run. Vientos fails. J.D. Martinez fails. I know it's tough to pick on Vientos. He had 2 home runs, but I'm just letting you know they had an opportunity to score in the 6th inning. They have an opportunity to score in the 7th inning. Tyrone Taylor leads off with a very impressive base hit. He steals second base. Jose Iglesias beats out a routine ground ball to shortstop. You have 2 on and 1 out. You're allowed to score. And you remember how I mentioned Carlos Mendoza did not have the greatest series managing? You got to explain this one to me. And I heard his postgame. His explanation sucked. Why are you pinch hitting Jeff McNeil, who had 3 quality at-bats in this game, who does not suck against lefties? He doesn't suck against lefties this year, at least compared to righties, and he hasn't done that in his major league career. That's not who he is. So he's not one of those left-handed hitters that you immediately have to get out because there's a lefty on the mound. Why are you pinch hitting Jeff McNeil with Francisco Alvarez, who, granted, Alvarez had some good at-bats the night before? I'll give him that. Is that really the move you want to make with 2 on and 1 out? And it sucks that we never got to see that at-bat really complete because Alvarez was thrown out on like the oddest play in the world in which he taps the ball in foul territory and Alvarez steps on home and basically runs into his own out. I blame him for it, but we never even got to see if Alvarez and Mendoza were going to prove us wrong, because I'm sure a lot of people, as we'll get to the email, did not like that move. It did make a lot of sense. Jeff McNeil, think about what he did just in this game. He has an 11-pitch double in the 2nd inning. Very, very impressive. He gets hit by a pitch, and then even in his strikeout in the 5th inning, it's a 10-pitch at-bat. So he's giving you these really quality at-bats. That's the guy you want to pinch hit for? Now, I want to answer this question. I want everybody to answer this question at home. Is there anybody in this lineup today that you would have pinch hit Francisco Alvarez for? Because if it's not Jeff McNeil, who is it? Is it Luis Torrens? Probably not. Luis Torrens has been a productive player, and he had a 2-run single a few innings earlier. My honest answer would probably be Harrison Bader, and that may not even be the best answer considering how clutch Harrison Bader has been this season. But outside of that, there really wasn't a place to pinch hit Francisco Alvarez. I mean, I guess it could have been for Jesse Winker earlier in the inning instead of Tyrone Taylor, but then you're using 2 guys to essentially replace 1 guy because someone's got to play left field. But you don't have to use Francisco Alvarez as a pinch hitter. Not the way he's been hitting recently. A couple of good at-bats in game 2 of this series is not enough. Colossal mistake. And then Luis Torrens lines out. Bad luck. Hits the ball hard. Hits it right at the shortstop. Now, I'm going to tell you something that may be irrational. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. But it's honestly how I felt watching this game. At this point, I'm actually feeling physically better. Watching this game was like a tale of a million stories. I got my son with me saying, why are they mentioning me? Because his name is Spence, and the A's pitcher's Mitch Spence. Middle of the innings, now I'm laying upside down in my bed. At this point in the 9th inning, when Mason Miller comes in, I'm actually starting to feel better. Not about the Mets. No. But like, all right, maybe the medicine's working. And when Mason Miller comes in, makes J.D. Martinez look like a child, and then hits Tyrone Taylor, and Pete Alonso comes up. Pete Alonso comes up as the winning run in the bottom of the 9th inning. I had a very irrational thought, or maybe it's rational, maybe it's fair. You tell me. I said to myself, he needs to hit a home run here. It's as simple as that. If you are going to be the guy I believe you are, if you are going to have that moment, because you haven't had a lot of moments this season, I'll be the first to tell you about Pete. His numbers at the end of the day may be decent, but he hasn't had a lot of moments this season. This is your moment. Kind of reminds me, or could have reminded me, of a couple of years ago. They were playing the Cardinals. It was an afternoon game. The Mets had started to struggle, and Pete hit this big game-winning home run against St. Louis. Walk-off. I think Eduardo Escobar had made an error in the top of the inning. Edwin Diaz had blown a game. It's certainly more important because it's August now, not the middle of May. This felt like Pete's moment. This felt like, all right, this is going to be kind of like the Marlins series that really got them going a few months ago. Lost the first game. This was after the London series. Won the second game, and they were trailing in the ninth inning, and they went on a game-winning home run by J.D. Martinez, if memory serves correct. Was it Brandon Nimmo? I think it was J.D. It felt very similar. And I'm sitting there looking at the TV screen saying, you got to hit the ball over the fence. There's no other option. And he got a Mason Miller 100-mile-per-hour fastball that was up, and he popped it up. Popped it up. And I know there's still a month and a half left in this season, and maybe there will be another moment that we don't see coming, but that felt like a monstrous missed opportunity by Pete Alonso. That could have been his moment. Think about what we would be saying right now, how we'd be feeling right now if Pete Alonso connected for his 27th home run and did it right there and in that moment. And I think deep down he knows that. So I don't usually sit there during at-bats and say, you need to hit a home run. Because truthfully, he could have had a base hit and, continue the inning. But I literally thought about him hitting one off the second deck like he did a night earlier. And he didn't, and he failed. Jose Iglesias draws the walk, and here's Francisco Alvarez. You can't make this stuff up. Again, Alvarez with that chance to shut us all up. Who didn't want him pinch hitting for Jeff McNeil? But as Alvarez is up, my brain's also telling me I'm pissed off Jeff McNeil isn't up. Because, again, Jeff McNeil had these quality at-bats. Jeff McNeil has played better in the second half of the year. If you're just looking at the second half of the season and ranking like Met performances, McNeil's towards the top. You want him up there in that spot. If he doesn't come through in the seventh, maybe he comes through in the ninth. And Alvarez hit the ball hard. I can't kill him for that. Problem was, it was right at J.J. Bleday. And the Mets lose this game. Brutal loss. Yes, it's the worst loss of the year. At least that's how I feel right now. We made that list in the first half of the year. We did a podcast during the All-Star break ranking all the terrible losses. The reason this one goes to number one, there's a few reasons. Number one, where we are in the season. It is the middle of August. These games are so damn important. Now, thank you to the Giants for avoiding the indignity of getting swept by Atlanta. Luckily, the Mets didn't lose another game to the Braves, so they'll at least go into the weekend 2 games behind Atlanta. You get a little lucky, you play a little bit better, the Mets could be in a wild card spot by the end of the weekend. I'm not counting on it. I'm just saying it could happen. So where they are in the season, that's number one. Number two, you have a 5-run lead against the Oakland A's. You have a 5-0 lead in the top of the 4th inning. Win that game. You can't lose that game. So I think those are the 2 main reasons. And I will give you a small third. And I want to make this very, very clear. This is small because at the end of the day, I don't give a rat's ass. But I do want to address it. What is happening right now around the franchise we love is something has come back. You know what came back? You know what returned to our Met universe? LOL. It came back. LOL has made a return. And there are people out there, some of them are just baseball fans from other cities. Some of them are Yankee fans. Some of them don't even care about baseball. They love to attach the LOL to the New York Mets. And there are teams that have that. In fact, there are a lot of teams in this city that have that. I believe for a while, the Knicks had that attached to them. Even when the Knicks didn't do anything that was LOL worthy, people couldn't wait to LOL the Knicks. The Jets still have it. LOL Jets. The Mets still have LOL Mets. And while it may not bother a lot of people listening, it bothers some, and it's annoying when it just rears its ugly head. So today, LOL Mets returned. Because quite frankly, and I'll speak for myself on this, I don't give a rat's ass if it's Grimace. I don't care if it's Gary Delabate. I don't care if it's 50 Cent. And I certainly don't care if it's Huatuca Girl. I know what it really is. I don't care if those at the first pitch in a Met game. But sometimes the good, Grimace, the bad, Haktua, leads to narratives that just you can't control. So once Haktua Girl throws out the first pitch and everybody's got their fake opinions or what they really think, I don't care. Like, that's just me. I don't give a rat's ass if it's Grimace or Haktua throwing out the first pitch. Doesn't mean anything to me. But what I knew was if they lose, especially if they blow it, which they did, this is now going to be the meme that follows the New York Mets. This will be the new LOL moment. And so I'm more upset that they lost. I'm more upset that they blew a 5-run lead. But you can't deny, whether you care about it or not, and I raise my hand, I don't care about it, that now the Mets they're being LOL'd. They're being LOL'd because they decided to have a, quote, viral sensation, throw out the first pitch, and then proceeded to blow a 5-run lead. So for anybody tuning in to Rico to just laugh at Met fans, you can have your laugh. Go ahead. You can chuckle it up. But I will tell you straightforward, I don't care about Haktua Girl. I don't care who threw out the first pitch, but I'm also not oblivious to what this has now become. It has now become the new joke around the Mets. So when Grimace threw out the first pitch, we all lean into it because it's fun, but nobody in their right mind thought the Mets were winning games because of Grimace. But it was fun, right? Especially for the kids. Here's a Grimace style. Grimace is our slogan. Yay. OMG probably has more of a connection to winning because it's actually in the room and the players love the song and they're dancing, they're having a good time, and there's some camaraderie to it. But the Grimace thing was just fun and it was a happy coincidence. But now we're facing a depressing coincidence. The Mets didn't blow a lead because of who threw out the first pitch. But now, if this season spirals, which it may, having nothing to do with who threw out the first pitch, this is now what it's going to be known for. And you don't have to agree with it. That's the reality. So that's the other aspect of this loss that absolutely sucked. But for me as a Met fan, it is you can't blow a 5-run lead to the Oakland A's. That's what it is. You can't have a 5-0 lead to this team. I know they played better recently and lose this game. You can't have the offense from the 4th inning on do nothing. You can't have this bullpen, especially a couple of guys, one guy who was acquired at the trade deadline, help spit the bit in blowing this game. You can't have Jose Quintana continuing to walk the world. You can't lose this game. I guess the one small piece of optimism I will give you is that while it feels like we're screwed, and while it feels like this season may spiral in a horrible direction, they are 2 games out. They play the Marlins. I mean, Mike, can they beat the Marlins 3 straight times? Can they do that for me? And I want to make this very, very clear, in my opinion. If they don't sweep the Miami Marlins this weekend, it's a disappointment, especially after losing 2 out of 3 to Oakland. Especially because the Mets have been mediocre against Miami all season long. They've got to beat them up. They've got to cleanse the garbage we've seen over the last 3 days. That's what they have to do. Are they going to do it? I can't sit here and be a beacon of confidence because one of the issues with this team is how inconsistent their starting pitching is. Not that we should be surprised by that. I don't think any of us thought that was going to be a beacon of consistency this season. But you take a guy like Jose Quintana, even Sean Manaea. Like Sean Manaea gives you those 2 brilliant starts in a row. He responds with a 3-inning performance. Quintana's last start was actually pretty damn good. And look at the way he responds. 4 innings, 4 runs, 4 walks. It should have been more. David Peterson, on the other hand, I mean, I give him a lot of credit. He pitched a hell of a game in Game 2 of this series and delivered when they needed it the most. He gave them such a shutdown performance against this Oakland team in Game 2 of this series after they lost the opener. So I give him a lot of credit. But their starting pitching is inconsistent. Their bullpen is still very up and down. Their offense disappears for long periods of time. And that's why I think what I'm really depressed about here in the middle of August is that this is who they are. Like, they are a mediocre, maybe slightly above 500 team. And I think about a month ago, maybe 2 months ago, if we had accepted that's what they were, we could have talked ourselves into why that was going to be enough to make the playoffs. And the reality is that's not going to be enough to make the playoffs, because you've seen two teams run away with it in Arizona and San Diego to the point where they are legitimately in the race for the National League West with the Dodgers. And a Brave team, while they've been very inconsistent and have allowed the Mets to hang in there, I'll tell you the same thing I told you in 2022. The Atlanta Braves will get hot. And so I think what's really depressing about this is, even if the Mets don't completely collapse like some of us fear, like the Frank the Tank's fear, like they're just going to lose 9 out of 11 and it's going to be a disaster. Even if they don't do that, I think what depresses me is, well, are they good enough to make the playoffs anyway? Like, are they good enough to go out and sweep the Miami Marlins, win 2 out of 3 against Baltimore, and then survive that West Coast trip? Are they good enough to get to 87 wins, which may not even be enough? And right now, it's very tough to answer that with an affirmative, because this team, for about a little over a month, has been a slightly above 500 team. And I'm starting to think that that's just what they are. Because think about all our critiques about this team. The starting pitching is mediocre. No kidding. Their bullpen is crappy, and even when it's good, you can't trust it. Okay. And their offense, which is supposed to be the strength of this team, will go innings and innings and innings completely disappearing. Well, is that team any good? That team I just described? All right, let's get to a couple of other thoughts from this series. I go back to game 1. I want to go deeper into game 1 because Paul Blackburn stunk. He was terrible. I mean, he was lucky even in that first inning when he picked off Lawrence Butler. Think about it. The first 3 guys got on. The first 5 of 6 batters got on against Paul Blackburn, but he was lucky. He got a pickoff and a fly ball to the warning track. But unfortunately, he still had a chance to get through the inning, and he gives up that 3-run double to Seth Brown. But here's where that game really killed me. So he gives up the 3 runs in the first inning. They're down 3-0. Sucks. But look, you're facing Joe Boyle. Joe Boyle's got a 7 ERA. I don't care how hard he throws. You can beat him. You can score runs against him. They have an opportunity in the second inning. They get 1 measly run in on a clutch hit by Jose Iglesias, but they still have 2 on. There's 1 out. They can't get any more runs in. Okay, 3-1. You got yourself back in the game. Not the end of the world. Then you've got Jose Iglesias, and I love him. It's tough to kill him, with first and second and nobody out, getting a ground ball to third base. And they didn't mention this on the broadcast, and you guys can go back and look at this. I believe the reason Jose Iglesias made that error to Andahar, which opened up the big inning, was because Jose Iglesias was trying to turn a triple play. I believe that. Because if you look at that play, remember, there's first and second and nobody out. Andahar, it's a ground ball to third base. And Iglesias is racing to third while reaching back to try to make the play. And I don't think he's doing that to turn a 5-5-3 double play. I think he's doing that because in his brain, and look, he's an artist defensively, so I get why he has that kind of confidence. He's thinking, if I can field this baseball and get to third base, I could go. The problem is, while that's a great idea, and that would have been an amazing OMG kind of play, you got to get an out or 2. And instead, the ball gets past them. And now the A's are putting more runs on the board. And then Shea Langoliers hits that bomb of a 3-run home run. Blackburn's ahead of the count 1-2. And now you're down 7-1. But my anger still continued because at 7-1, my thought is this team can come back, right? Like, they have the offense capable of doing so. You're facing Joe Boyle, why not? Why not? Bottom of the third inning. Leadoff double by Francisco Lindor. They can't score him. Pete Alonso strikes out. Mark Vientos strikes out, who came in for JD after he got hit by a pitch. They can't score when they have a runner on second and nobody out. It's a 7-1 game. If you score that singular run, that's all I'm asking, 7-2. Okay. Fourth inning, another leadoff double. Got a runner on second, nobody out. You can't score that run. If you score that singular run, it's 7-3. Then they put that rally together in the fifth inning where they score a bunch of runs. They get an RBI double by Jesse Winker. They get a clutch 2-run single by Pete Alonso. All of a sudden, it's 7-4. If those 2 runs had scored that were set up 2 innings earlier, it ain't 7-4, it's 7-6. Now, does everything play out differently? Maybe it does. Maybe Joe Boyle comes out earlier. Maybe Austin Adams with a 1-run lead with 2 on and nobody out, as opposed to a 3-run lead, maybe pitches differently. I have no idea. The point is the Mets missed out on opportunities in the 3rd and 4th inning. With that said, they had a chance to hit Austin Adams. And look, credit to Austin Adams. He did a hell of a job. He danced his way off the mound with the OMG. He cursed everybody out. He struck out Jeff McNeil. He got Iglesias to pop up. He struck out Francisco Alvarez. Credit to Austin Adams. Now, as far as Jose Butto is concerned, Jose Butto gave up runs in the 6th inning. So Jose Butto was a part of why a 7-4 game very quickly became 9-4. He was not his best. He did not throw strikes. We didn't see the best of Jose Butto. But let's get back to that. Why is Carlos Mendoza using him in a 7-1 game in the 5th inning? He is not the long man. This isn't Pat Mahomes from 1999 or Darren Oliver from 2006. You can't treat him that way. Yeah, I get it. He can be a long man because he's a starting pitcher, but he can't be the long man in this bullpen. He needs to be what Seth Lugo was. What a name to bring up, considering the guy may win the Cy Young, but he needs to be the Seth Lugo from a few years ago. It's a close game. It's a winnable game. He's that bullet that you can use because when you use him, you probably can't use him for 3 more days. So do you really think in a 7-1 game, that's the moment to use the bullet? And I'll admit this to you. Even if he had shut them down and the Mets had come back and won that game, I would have said, wow, it worked out. But boy, that's risky using your best reliever in a game like that. So that's my issue. And they got to clean that up. Mendy's got to figure this out because this bullpen is not that good. Ryan Stanek and Huascar Brazoban and Reed Garrett and Phil Maton, every last one of them, they're all the same. They can be good one day. They may suck and implode another day. Jose Butto, despite not pitching well on Tuesday, which I admit, has mostly been really, really good. So why use him in a situation like that? But again, same thing with the offense. I go back to that. They scored the 3 runs in the 5th inning to get back in the game. They did nothing after that. They got absolutely shut down. By who? Austin Adams, Scott Alexander, TJ McFarland, Tyler Ferguson. Not good. And again, that needs to be the identity of this team. They did win the middle game of this series. Kudos to David Peterson, Francisco Lindor hitting a home run. Pete Alonso had a great game. He went 4 for 4. He drove in a bunch of runs. Good for him. That's fantastic. They won a big game in the moment, a game that I felt, and I said on the radio that day, was their most important win of the year. What I should have added was, that's their most important game of the year, as is the following day, because they need to win the next 2 games, which they did not do. Now let's get to some of your emails, because we are ending this podcast in exactly 10 minutes. And the reason why is because, A, I feel like crap, but B, Pete Hoffman's at Disney World. This guy's riding rides. He's watching fireworks. I can't make that man work all night long. He's already an American hero. So let's get to some of your emails. Let's start with Steven Fescani. Evan, huge fan of what you do. Enjoy the podcast. Thank you. I'm sitting here watching Huascar Brazoban try to hold a lead on the A's in the 5th inning, and I can't help but get frustrated by the way this team has used Jose Butto, arguably the best weapon this bullpen has. I bought into the plan right before the deadline to keep him stretched following Kodai Senga's injury. Now that they've brought in Blackburn, who's been mostly good so far, it is now malpractice and a total waste to continue to use Butto in non-high leverage situations for multiple innings every 3 to 4 days. It's go time to win games and stay in the race. Please stop using him in a diminished role. Either start him or use him to win games out of the pen. You likely have already covered this, but it's now getting worse. It is getting worse. That excuse made sense. The trade deadline has passed. Now, granted, the Mets could still add players. We haven't talked about this on the Rico. I'll briefly mention it. We saw this last year where teams who were buying at the deadline or weren't selling can now pivot and say, screw it, we're out of it. We're just going to put guys on waivers. Now, the only purpose to do that is to save money. So even if the Mets fell out of it, I would not be in favor of the Mets just placing guys on waivers because there's no benefit. Really all you're doing is saving money. It's the only benefit to it. So other teams do it fine. I don't care. And one of the teams Ken Rosenthal mentioned was Texas. And some of the names are David Robertson, Nate Eovaldi, guys like that. And yeah, that'd be great additions. So the Mets could still technically add players, but I agree with Steven. The days and the discussions of, well, maybe Budo can re-enter the rotation, that's gone. He needs to be a weapon out of the bullpen. And you take that away when you use him in a 7-1 game in the 5th inning. Javon Grams writes, 1-5 in their last 6 games. Lost the series to the A's after already losing a series to the Angels. It feels a lot like September 2022. My biggest gripe is with Mendy over the use of Jose Budo. He uses Budo on Tuesday in a 7-1 game. What are we doing? Now he needs Budo for a game like Thursday, and he's not available, thus allowing Braziban and Reed Garrett to blow the game. Braziban pitches great when the Mets are losing and pitches bad when the Mets are winning. Not surprising considering he comes from the Marlins. Reed Garrett had one good month in his entire career this April. He's not a high leverage arm to be counted on to get big outs. He came back versus the Mariners and struck out the side with the Mets losing 4-0. Now in a 1-run ball game, he craps the bed and blows the game, which was not surprising at all. In fact, they already knew the lead was gone as soon as Reed Garrett came into this game. Braziban and Garrett are to be used in lopsided games, not Jose Budo. This has cost us one game versus the Angels and cost us another today. The Braves are losing. It's a wasted opportunity, but so typical. Another day crossed off the schedule of not gaining any ground. So that last part, yes, it's a missed opportunity. Because the Mets lost the game prior, I'm sitting there thinking, you know what? Let's just save our asses and remain only 2 games out. And that's the truth. So it is a missed opportunity, but luckily, they do remain only 2 games out. The Braves are going to play the Anaheim Angels. The Mets are playing the Marlins. The fingers are crossed the Mets turn this thing around. They get some help from the Angels who played reasonably well. And maybe the Mets are back tied in a wild card race. Look, right now, and I think we'd all agree with this statement I'm about to make, get me to the Atlanta series, which is the last road trip of the year. It's the last week of the year. Get me to that series within a game of the Atlanta Braves. If you got me that, assuming the Braves are in a playoff spot, not a game within the Braves, and the Braves are 5 games behind like a suddenly hot Cincinnati Red team. You know what I mean? I would sign for that in a half a second. Now, that doesn't mean I'd have confidence that the Mets would go to Atlanta and, overcome the demons of 2 years ago. But at this point, I think we'd all sign for something like that. Fred Solomon, worst loss of the year. Seems fitting that Hawk Tua girl threw out the first pitch because this game sucked. Maybe it's a recency bias. Alvarez just flew out to end it, but this was the worst loss of the year. Worse than the Josh Bell game in Miami, worse than the Josh Bailey Grand Slam game in May. You have a 5-0 lead with 2 outs in the 4th, and Quintana can't hold that. The offense does nothing against the A's bullpen for almost 7 innings. Disgusting. So at the end of the season, we are going to do our countdown of worst losses of the year, and they will include the first half. And the reason why a loss like this has such an advantage over all those first half losses is because we know what happened next. The Mets saved their season. The Mets began turning their season around. This may not be the case. I don't know what's going to happen next. And right now, it's tough to be very confident that what's going to happen next is going to be good. Aaron Miller agrees this is the worst loss of the year. And everyone's going to kill the pitching, and rightfully so. And I know the offense put up 6 runs, but when the team saw the pitching didn't have, the offense couldn't muster any more runs. And I mean, it was the right call, but Alvarez running into the ball while his feet were out of the batter's box is so Metsian. And then Aaron makes the same joke we've all made about the Mets blowing a game with what's her name throwing out the first pitch. Thank you very much. Yeah, it was the right call, but it was incredibly frustrating. I mean, seeing Francisco Alvarez basically run into home plate and have the inning, not the inning end, but at least that at bat end. Casey Manning writes, the dud line. Are you finally willing to admit that the trade deadline was a complete misfire? While this team blows a lead to one of the worst teams in baseball at home, let's talk about how at the deadline they were 7 games over 500 in a playoff spot. Since then, they're 3 under on the way to being 4 under, and possibly 3 games out of the third wild card spots, 2 games. They added a borderline 4th, 5th starter and a bunch of relievers nobody wanted. You can talk until you're blue in the face about not mortgaging the future, yada, 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 but I'm so sick and tired of hearing that nonsense. Kodai was hurt. Sevilla's logging mornings than ever. Quintana's old, and they added barely anything. It is completely unacceptable to be in this market and add like you're still in Milwaukee. Sorry, I want nothing more to be wrong. Maybe they'll put this game out of their ass, but my point stands. We wait, and some more. Same story. Casey, I completely disagree with you. I don't disagree that the team isn't playing well. I don't disagree with you that so far the trade acquisitions haven't worked. But my counter to you would be, what did you want them to do? Tell me the players that you wanted them to get. And if your answer is Blake Snell, I will counter and say, he didn't get traded. Was he really available? So I never sold you that this deadline was going to work in terms of winning. I admitted they were lottery tickets. I admitted, hey, you bring in Brazaban, you bring in Ryan Stanek, you bring in Phil Maton. We'll see. So I never told you that it's all going to be the Braves of 2021. But what I did tell you was they weren't good enough, nor were there good enough players out there, nor was it smart with this farm system to go much bigger than what they did. So this is not 2022 to me at the deadline. So my question for you, Casey, who will write back, he's a very good listener to the Rico and a very reliable emailer, is I understand your anger and frustration. We're all angry and frustrated right now. What did you want them to do? What would have been your trade deadline? Well, here's what I know. They got 3 games coming up against the Miami Marlins. It didn't sound like Brandon Nimmo was a lock to be back in the lineup on Friday. I guess he had a stomach issue and did not play in this game for that reason. Mendy was uncommitted to him being back for Friday. If he is back Friday, he cannot bat second. Despite 3 righties being on the mound this weekend for Miami, I would hit Mark Vientos second. I would stick with that. Why not? Why screw around with it? And Pete Hoffman, give him what he wants. Give me what I want. Bat Brandon Nimmo 8th. Bury him in the order. Take the pressure off of him. Tell Brandon Nimmo, you know what? Just figure things out with less pressure on you. He's been so bad for such a long period of time. I'm not ready to bench him, but I am ready to drop him in the batting order. It'll be Sean Manaea trying to bounce back from his last bad start against Roddery Munoz. It'll be Luis Severino, who I think has pitched better than his pitching lines of recent ilk on Saturday against Max Meyer. And Paul Blackburn is going to try to bounce back from his abysmal start at Citi-Field against Valentin Baezo, who I think has pitched very well for Miami. So win all 3. That's my bar. Sweep the Miami Marlins before 3 games against the Baltimore Orioles. That is the only way to calm us all down. And that is the only way to eliminate this LOL Mets Hawk Tua version of the New York Mets. The only way to eliminate it, the only way to shut people up, the only way to have that be like a passing memory in the 2024 season is to just win. No excuses. Save us, please, because I'm already sick of hearing about it. We'll give you another Rico clearly after the series is over against Miami on Sunday. We may mix in a surprise Rico before that. We do appreciate you listening and subscribing. Remember, you can subscribe to Rico Brogna's podcast wherever you download your podcast, rate and review, and you can also send us an email anytime with thoughts on what's going on with this team. We tried to get to as many as we can, thericob@gmail.com. Thank you very much for listening and subscribing to another edition, a depressing edition of Rico Brogna.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of the Rico Brogna podcast. It's amazing, isn't it? Make sure you download it now to keep it on you at all times.